Welcome back, everyone. This is the Level 3 detective of my new Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg series, where we will cover almost everything from alien civilizations to government mysteries. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this series, and of course, thank you for watching. Dr. No. Dr. No is the nickname given to a suspected serial killer believed to have been active in Ohio between 1981 and 2004. The case involves the murders of at least 9 women, most of whom were involved in prostitution or had ties to truck stops along Interstate 71. These women were found dead, often strangled or suffocated, and their bodies were left in rural areas, sometimes near highways. The nickname Dr. No originated from a clue given by one of the victims before her death, where she mentioned meeting a man with that name. The first known victim was Shirley Dean Taylor, found in Miami County, Ohio, in 1986. Over the next several years, more bodies were discovered with similar patterns of assault and disposal. The victims' profiles and the consistency of the crime scenes led investigators to believe that they were dealing with a single perpetrator. The case gained significant attention in the late 1980s and early 1990s as more bodies were found, each case bearing eerie similarities to the others. One of the challenges faced by investigators was the transient nature of the victims. Many were sex workers or women who frequented truck stops, making it difficult to track their movements and identify potential suspects. Additionally, the killer's method of disposing of the bodies in remote areas hindered the collection of crucial forensic evidence. Despite these obstacles, law enforcement continued to pursue leads and examine connections between the cases, hoping to uncover the identity of Dr. No. Advances in DNA technology have offered some hope in solving the case. In recent years, authorities have re-examined evidence from the crime scenes, hoping to find new clues through genetic analysis. These efforts have led to the identification of potential suspects and renewed interest in the cold case. Despite these advancements, the true identity of Dr. No remains elusive, and the case continues to haunt the communities affected by these brutal crimes. The case of Dr. No is one of Ohio's most chilling and unresolved mysteries. The fear generated by the murders and the lack of closure for the victims' families have left a lasting impact on the region. The ongoing search for answers serves as a reminder of the importance of advancements in forensic science and the determination of law enforcement to bring justice to those who have suffered at the hands of a serial killer. Torso killer. The Torso Killer, also known as the Times Square Torso Ripper, refers to Richard Cottingham, a notorious American serial killer active primarily in New York and New Jersey from the late 1960s to the early 1980s. Cottingham earned his gruesome moniker due to his brutal methods of dismembering his victims, often leaving their torsos behind and taking the heads and limbs. His horrifying crimes shocked the nation and left an indelible mark on criminal history. Cottingham's killing spree began in 1967, but his most infamous period of activity occurred between 1977 and 1980. He preyed on vulnerable women, particularly sex workers and young women he encountered in New York's Times Square. Cottingham's modus operandi involved abducting his victims, taking them to motels, and subjecting them to hours of torture before ultimately killing them. He would often decapitate and dismember their bodies, leaving behind only the torsos, a signature that earned him his macabre nickname. One of the most infamous cases associated with Cottingham was the murder of 2 women whose torsos were found in a New York motel room in December 1979. This discovery marked a turning point in the investigation, bringing significant media attention to the case. The brutality of the murders and the sensational nature of the crimes created a climate of fear in New York City, prompting an intense manhunt for the killer. Cottingham was finally apprehended in May 1980 after a hotel maid heard screams coming from his room and alerted the police. When officers arrived, they found a woman bound and tortured, but miraculously alive. Cottingham was arrested at the scene, and subsequent investigations linked him to several unsolved murders through physical evidence and his own confessions. In total, he was convicted of murdering 6 women, but he claimed responsibility for at least a dozen more. Richard Cottingham's case is particularly notable for his detailed confessions and the insights he provided into his methods and motivations. He revealed a sadistic pleasure in inflicting pain and exerting control over his victims, driven by deep-seated psychological issues. His arrest and subsequent trial shed light on the dark underbelly of New York's sex industry and the dangers faced by vulnerable women during that era. Despite his conviction, the full extent of Cottingham's crimes may never be known. His case remains a haunting chapter in the annals of American criminal history, illustrating the terrifying capabilities of a sadistic serial killer. The legacy of the Torso Killer continues to serve as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance, advanced investigative techniques, and the relentless pursuit of justice for victims of violent crime. Tire Deflator Killer. The Tire Deflator Killer, also known as the Freeway Phantom, refers to an unidentified serial killer who terrorized the Washington, D.C. area in the early 1970s. This elusive criminal earned his nickname by placing tire deflators on roadways, causing unsuspecting motorists to experience flat tires. When they pulled over to fix the problem, the killer would strike, abducting, assaulting, and ultimately murdering his victims. The spree began in April 1971 when the body of Carol Spinks, a 13-year-old girl, was found alongside a highway just days after she had gone missing. Spinks had been abducted while running an errand, and her body showed signs of assault and strangulation. Over the next 16 months, the killer would claim 5 more young victims, all African-American girls aged between 10 and 18. Each victim was abducted, held captive for several days, and then brutally murdered. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Tire Deflator Killer's modus operandi was his practice of contacting the families of his victims. On at least one occasion, he taunted the police with phone calls, revealing details about the murders that had not been released to the public. These calls added a layer of psychological torment to an already horrifying series of crimes. Despite extensive investigations by multiple law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, the killer remained at large. The case was plagued by a lack of physical evidence and credible leads, making it difficult for investigators to make significant progress. The Freeway Phantom's ability to avoid detection and capture only added to the fear and frustration experienced by the community and law enforcement alike. One of the last known victims of the Tire Deflator Killer was Brenda Woodard, an 18-year-old girl whose body was discovered in November 1971. Woodard's case was particularly notable because she was found with a handwritten note from the killer, a chilling message that confirmed the same person was responsible for the previous murders. Despite this crucial piece of evidence, the trail eventually went cold. Over the years, numerous suspects have been considered, but none have been definitively linked to the crimes. Some theories suggest the killer may have been someone with knowledge of law enforcement techniques, given his ability to evade capture. Others believe he might have died or been incarcerated for other crimes, explaining the abrupt end to the killings. The Tire Deflator Killer's reign of terror remains one of Washington, D.C.'s most haunting unsolved mysteries. The case serves as a grim reminder of the challenges faced by law enforcement in tracking down elusive serial killers and the profound impact such crimes have on victims' families and communities. The search for answers continues, with the hope that advancements in forensic technology might one day bring the elusive killer to justice. St. Louis bombing. The St. Louis bombing, a tragic and impactful event, took place on November 7th, 1980. The explosion occurred at the National Guard Armory in St. Louis, Missouri, and resulted in the deaths of 3 police officers: Lieutenant Robert Heitz, Sergeant James Gresham, and Officer Michael J. White. This bombing sent shockwaves through the community and marked a dark day in the city's history. The explosion was the result of a powerful bomb placed inside a locker within the armory. The device was designed to inflict maximum damage and casualties, and its detonation caused significant destruction to the building and surrounding area. The blast was so intense that it left a crater in the floor and caused parts of the structure to collapse. Investigators quickly determined that the bombing was a deliberate act of terrorism. The initial suspicion fell on various extremist groups that were active during that period, but pinpointing the responsible party proved to be challenging. The complexity of the bomb and the meticulous planning suggested that the perpetrators had significant expertise in explosives. In the weeks and months following the bombing, a massive investigation was launched involving local law enforcement, the FBI, and other federal agencies. Despite extensive efforts, the case went cold due to the lack of concrete evidence and leads. The families of the victims, as well as the community at large, were left in a state of shock and mourning. Over the years, several theories have been proposed about who might have been responsible for the bombing. Some speculated that it was the work of radical political groups, while others believed it could have been carried out by individuals with personal vendettas against the police. However, none of these theories have been substantiated with definitive proof. The St. Louis bombing remains an unsolved case to this day, a haunting reminder of the vulnerability to domestic terrorism and the enduring grief of the victims' families. Despite the passage of time, the search for answers continues, and advancements in forensic technology offer a glimmer of hope that one day those responsible for this heinous act will be brought to justice. The memory of Lieutenant Robert Heitz, Sergeant James Gresham, and Officer Michael J. White lives on, honored for their service and sacrifice in the face of senseless violence. Yvonne Fletcher. Yvonne Fletcher, a British police officer, tragically lost her life in an incident that shocked the nation and had significant diplomatic repercussions. On April 17, 1984, Officer Fletcher was on duty during a protest outside the Libyan embassy in St. James's Square, London. The demonstration was against Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, organised by Libyan exiles who opposed his regime. The peaceful protest quickly turned deadly when shots were fired from the embassy into the crowd. Fletcher, who was 25 years old at the time, was struck by a bullet while performing her duties. Despite the immediate medical attention she received, she succumbed to her injuries shortly after. The shocking murder of a police officer in broad daylight and in such a public manner caused widespread outrage in the United Kingdom and beyond. The incident led to an intense standoff between British authorities and the Libyan embassy staff. The building was surrounded by police, and diplomatic relations between the UK and Libya became severely strained. The siege lasted for 11 days, during which time the embassy staff remained inside under diplomatic immunity. Eventually, the embassy personnel were expelled from the UK and diplomatic relations were severed. The murder of Yvonne Fletcher had far-reaching consequences. It led to significant changes in how the UK approached diplomatic immunity and security measures for foreign embassies. The incident also intensified the scrutiny of Gaddafi's regime and its activities in Europe. Despite extensive investigations by British authorities, including the Metropolitan Police, those responsible for the shooting have never been brought to justice. The complexity of international law and diplomatic immunity posed significant challenges in pursuing legal action against the suspects, who were believed to have been shielded by the Libyan government. In the years following her death, Yvonne Fletcher has been commemorated in various ways. Memorials have been established in her honor, and her name remains synonymous with the risks and sacrifices faced by police officers. The continued efforts to seek justice for Fletcher's murder reflect the enduring impact of her death on the British public and the police force. Yvonne Fletcher's tragic death serves as a poignant reminder of the dangers faced by law enforcement officers and the intricate challenges of international diplomacy and justice. Her legacy endures through the ongoing pursuit of answers and the honor bestowed upon her memory by colleagues, friends, and the nation. Itavia 810 Flight. Itavia Flight 870, also known as the Itavia DC-9, was a passenger flight that met a tragic end on June 27, 1980. The aircraft, en route from Bologna to Palermo, Italy, crashed into the Tyrrhenian Sea near the island of Ustica, killing all 81 people on board. The mysterious circumstances surrounding the crash have made it one of Italy's most enduring aviation mysteries. Initial investigations suggested a variety of possible causes, including mechanical failure, a bomb explosion, or a missile strike. The wreckage and bodies recovered from the sea provided limited clues, but early reports indicated signs of an explosion. This led to widespread speculation and numerous theories about what might have caused the crash. One prevailing theory is that Flight 870 was inadvertently caught in a military operation involving NATO forces and Libyan fighter jets. Some believe the plane was struck by a missile, possibly fired by a NATO aircraft, during an attempted interception of a Libyan MiG-23 jet. This theory gained traction due to radar evidence suggesting the presence of other aircraft in the vicinity at the time of the crash. Additionally, there were reports of increased military activity in the area on the night of the incident. In 1994, Italian courts ruled that the plane had been brought down by a missile, likely during a military exercise, leading to renewed calls for transparency and accountability. However, the exact details of the event remain shrouded in secrecy, with many documents classified and inaccessible to the public. The lack of conclusive evidence has perpetuated numerous conspiracy theories and left the victims' families seeking answers for decades. Further complicating the investigation were allegations of a cover-up involving the Italian government and military. Several key witnesses and investigators experienced intimidation, and some died under suspicious circumstances. These events fueled suspicions of a deliberate effort to conceal the true cause of the crash. In 2007, Italy's highest court held the government responsible for failing to ensure the safety of the flight and awarded compensation to the victims' families. Despite this, the true cause of the disaster remains unresolved. Efforts to declassify documents and uncover the full truth continue, driven by the persistence of those affected by the tragedy. The crash of Itavia, Flight 870, stands as a somber reminder of the complexities and potential dangers of military operations near civilian airspace. It also underscores the importance of transparency and accountability in investigations of such incidents. The quest for answers continues, with the hope that one day the full truth will be revealed, providing closure to the families and honoring the memory of those who lost their lives on that fateful flight. Skid Row. Skid Row, located in downtown Los Angeles, is one of the most infamous neighborhoods in the United States. Known for its high concentration of homeless individuals, it has become a symbol of the urban poverty crisis in America. Spanning about 50 square blocks, Skid Row has been a focal point of social and economic challenges for decades, highlighting issues related to homelessness, mental health, and addiction. The origins of Skid Row date back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when the area served as a hub for transient workers and laborers. During the Great Depression, the neighborhood saw an influx of unemployed men seeking work and shelter. Over time, as economic conditions fluctuated, the area became increasingly associated with poverty and homelessness. By the 1970s, Skid Row had become a designated containment zone where city officials and social services concentrated their efforts to manage the homeless population. Skid Row is home to thousands of people, many of whom live in tents, makeshift shelters, or temporary housing. The area has numerous shelters, missions, and outreach programs aimed at providing support and resources to its residents. Organizations like the Midnight Mission, Union Rescue Mission, and Los Angeles Mission offer meals, shelter, medical care, and addiction recovery programs. Despite these efforts, the demand for services often exceeds the available resources, leaving many without adequate support. The challenges faced by residents of Skid Row are multifaceted. Mental illness and substance abuse are prevalent, exacerbated by a lack of accessible healthcare and rehabilitation services. The neighborhood's conditions are often dire, with unsanitary living environments and limited access to basic amenities. Crime and violence are also significant issues, with residents frequently exposed to danger and exploitation. Efforts to address the crisis in Skid Row have been ongoing but met with mixed results. In recent years, there have been numerous initiatives aimed at reducing homelessness and improving living conditions. These include affordable housing projects, mental health and addiction treatment programs, and policy reforms focused on homelessness prevention. However, the scale of the problem and systemic issues like income inequality, housing affordability, and inadequate social services continue to pose significant challenges. Skid Row has also been the subject of considerable public and media attention, often highlighting the stark contrast between the neighborhood and the wealthier areas of Los Angeles. Documentaries, news reports, and advocacy efforts have brought visibility to the plight of its residents, prompting calls for more comprehensive and compassionate solutions. Despite the grim realities, Skid Row is also a community with resilience and a strong sense of solidarity among its residents. Many individuals and organizations are dedicated to advocating for the rights and dignity of those living in the area. The story of Skid Row is not just one of hardship, but also of hope, activism, and the ongoing struggle for a better future for its inhabitants. Mexicali Ripper. The Mexicali Ripper is a chilling figure in the annals of Mexican criminal history, responsible for a series of brutal murders that shocked the city of Mexicali in the early 2000s. The name Mexicali Ripper draws an eerie parallel to the infamous Jack the Ripper due to the gruesome nature of the crimes and the elusiveness of the perpetrator. The Mexicali Ripper's reign of terror began in 2001, when the bodies of several women were discovered in various parts of Mexicali, a city located on the border between Mexico and the United States. The victims were typically young women who had been subjected to extreme violence, including sexual assault and mutilation. The brutality of the murders and the apparent lack of motive created an atmosphere of fear and paranoia in the community. The modus operandi of the Mexicali Ripper involved luring victims, often under the pretense of offering them employment or other opportunities. Once isolated, the killer would strike with sadistic precision. The bodies were often left in public places, further heightening the public's fear and the media's frenzy. The police found themselves under intense pressure to solve the case as the body count rose, and the media dubbed the unknown killer the Mexicali Ripper. One of the significant challenges faced by investigators was the lack of concrete evidence. The killer was meticulous in avoiding detection, leaving minimal forensic traces that could lead to an identification. Despite numerous leads and the deployment of substantial resources, including collaboration with American law enforcement agencies, the case remained unsolved for years. The lack of progress in the investigation led to widespread frustration and criticism of the police force's handling of the case. In the absence of a clear suspect, several theories emerged regarding the identity of the Mexicali Ripper. Some speculated that the killer might have been a transient individual, possibly crossing the border between Mexico and the United States. Others believed that the murders could have been the work of more than one person, given the varying methods and locations of the attacks. There were also suggestions that the killer could be someone familiar with law enforcement techniques, given the apparent effort to avoid leaving forensic evidence. Despite these challenges, law enforcement continued their pursuit of the Mexicali Ripper. Advances in forensic technology and DNA analysis provided renewed hope for a breakthrough. In 2006, a suspect named Jesus Manuel Peralta was arrested and charged with the murders. Peralta's arrest brought a sense of relief to the community, although some questions and doubts about his guilt remained. Nevertheless, the arrest marked a significant step forward in addressing the fears that had gripped Mexicali for years. The legacy of the Mexicali Ripper is one of horror and unresolved questions. While the arrest of Peralta brought some closure, the true extent of the killer's crimes and the full truth behind the case remain shrouded in mystery. The Mexicali Ripper's story serves as a grim reminder of the capacity for human brutality and the challenges that law enforcement faces in bringing such elusive criminals to justice. Subscribe and press the notification to get updates for upcoming parts of this Iceberg.